Hey everyone, it's Philip DeFranco here, and today I'm diving into one of the biggest stories shaking the global economy right now, US-China trade tensions. So let's cut right to the chase. Former President Donald Trump has reignited trade tensions with China, announcing new tariffs on nearly all Chinese imports. We're talking about tariffs ranging from 25% to a whopping 60%, targeting key sectors like electric vehicles, semiconductors, and steel. Trump justifies these tariffs as a move to protect national security and economic sovereignty. In direct response, China slapped a 34% tariff on all American goods. This massive tariff affects over $200 billion worth of U.S. exports, including agriculture products like soybeans and corn, semiconductors, and even Boeing aircraft. Beijing is calling this a defensive move, while Washington sees it as an aggressive act. Now, let's talk about the ripple effects. Stock markets around the world are in freefall. In just the past 24 hours, we've seen the FTSE 100 in London drop 5%, Japan's Nikkei down 4%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng plummet more than 6%. In the US, the Nasdaq has entered bear market territory with tech giants like Apple, Google, and Amazon dragging it down nearly 7%. Currency markets are also in turmoil. The US dollar has surged, while emerging market currencies like the South African rand and Brazilian real have taken a nosedive. Gold is up, oil is down, and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin have lost over 12% of their value in just one day. The economic landscape is looking pretty grim right now. Analysts are warning of severe damage to global supply chains, increased consumer prices, and a potential slowdown in the post-pandemic recovery. JP Morgan has even raised the probability of a global recession to 60%. Higher costs for US families are a real possibility, with things like high-end iPhones potentially hitting $2,300. Politically, this is a high-stakes game. European countries, Japan and Canada are urging negotiation and criticizing the US for its aggressive stance. The Biden administration, while cautious, has stated it will protect American interests. Meanwhile, China is seeking a multilateral response through the BRICS alliance, and the US is looking for support from G7 allies. And let's not forget the corporate impacts. Companies like Apple and Tesla are reassessing their supply chains and diplomatic positioning. Stellantis is announcing layoffs and closures in Canada and Mexico, while GM plans to ramp up US production. Stocks for companies with deep China ties like Nike have taken significant hits. But it's not all doom and gloom. Some manufacturers in South Korea, Vietnam, and Mexico could benefit as companies shift supply lines. In fact, Vietnam's exports to the US have nearly tripled since 2017. However, Vietnam remains vulnerable due to its reliance on Chinese suppliers. In other geopolitical news, South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol has been impeached and removed from office after corruption scandals and mass protests. The country now has 60 days to elect a new president. This adds another layer of complexity to an already tense global situation. So what's next? The world is watching closely as the IMF and G20 prepare to intervene. The global economy is on edge, and the consequences of this trade war are unpredictable. All we can do now is stay informed and hope for the best. That's it. You wouldn't hit a friend, would you? Things are getting a little frosty between the neighbors, eh? I'm talking about Canada and the US, of course. You know, those friendly folks who share the world's longest undefended border? Yeah, well, turns out even the nicest neighbors can have their differences. And by differences, I mean a full-blown trade war. The US, in its infinite wisdom, decided to slap tariffs on some pretty important Canadian goods. Steel and cars, to be exact. Now, Canada is known for many things, maple syrup, Celine Dion, and being ridiculously polite. But one thing Canadians don't mess around with is fair trade. So, what did Canada do? They hit back with tariffs of their own. That's right, they targeted American cars and agricultural products. It's a classic case of, you hit me, I hit you back. Except in this case, it's more like you tax me, I tax you back. This whole situation has got everyone talking. Economists are throwing around words like depreciation and inflation. Industry leaders are worried about jobs. And Canadians? Well, they're just wondering when they can go back to peacefully enjoying their poutine without the threat of economic meltdown. Let's break it down, shall we? The US decided it needed to protect its own industries. Fair enough, right? Every country wants to look after its own. But here's the thing, these tariffs, they don't just affect the US, they have a ripple effect, and guess who's feeling the splash? That's right, Canada. See, Canada and the US, they're like those best friends who finish each other's sentences. They're economically intertwined, so when one sneezes, the other catches a cold. And right now, Canada's got a full-blown case of the tariff flu. The tariffs on steel and cars, they're a direct hit to Canada's manufacturing sector. And the retaliatory tariffs? Well, they're aimed at some of America's biggest exports. It's a lose-lose situation, really, like watching two of your friends get into a bar fight. You just want them to stop, but they're too busy throwing punches. Now, when it comes to these trade wars, it's not just the big picture we need to worry about, it's the real-life impact on everyday people. And in Canada, two provinces are feeling the heat more than others: Ontario and Quebec. Why these two? Well, they happen to be the heartland of Canada's manufacturing and auto industries. They rely heavily on exports to the US. So when the US slaps tariffs on those exports, it's like cutting off the lifeblood of these provinces. Jobs are at risk. Businesses are struggling. It's enough to make you want to drown your sorrows in a plate of poutine. But even that might be a luxury soon with the price of cheese and potatoes going up. You know, things are serious when even the CEOs are starting to sweat. And in Canada, the CEOs of major industries are definitely feeling the heat. The auto industry, the steel industry, they're all bracing for impact. See, these tariffs, they add an extra cost to doing business. And that extra cost, it has to come from somewhere. Sometimes it means raising prices. But other times it means making tough decisions like layoffs. And that's what has industry leaders worried. They're seeing the writing on the wall. They know that if this trade war continues, it's going to cost jobs. And not just a few jobs either. We're talking thousands, potentially tens of thousands of jobs. Section 5. Buckle up for a bumpy ride. Economic predictions. Hold on to your toques, Canada, because the economists are predicting a bumpy ride ahead. They're throwing around terms like currency depreciation and inflation. And let's be real, nobody really understands what those terms mean, but they sound scary, don't they? Basically, what they're saying is that this trade war could hurt Canada's economy. The Canadian dollar might weaken. Prices might go up. And nobody likes it when prices go up, except maybe maple syrup producers. But even they have their limits. The worst-case scenario? A full-blown recession. Now, nobody's saying that's going to happen for sure. But it's a possibility, and that's enough to make everyone a little bit nervous. Section 6. Can we talk? The Chamber makes a plea. Amidst all this doom and gloom, there is a voice of reason. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce. They're basically the grown-ups in the room, trying to get everyone to calm down and talk it out. They're urging both sides to come to the negotiating table to find a solution that works for everyone. Because let's face it, this trade war, it's not doing anyone any good. It's hurting businesses, it's costing jobs, and it's making everyone stressed out. The Chamber's message is simple. Let's be adults here. Let's put aside our differences and find a way to work together. After all, Canada and the US, they're not just neighbors. They're friends, partners, allies. They're practically family. And families should be able to work things out, right? Section 7. The price of protectionism. Consumers brace for impact. Here's the thing about trade wars. They might start with governments and industries, but they always end up hitting regular people in the wallet. And in this Canada-US trade spat, consumers are bracing for impact. Think about it. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, that means higher prices for cars, appliances, even beer cans. Tariffs on agricultural products, that means pricier fruits, vegetables, and maybe even that Canadian bacon you love so much. Suddenly that trip to the grocery store is starting to look a lot more expensive. And let's not even get started on the price of gas. It's enough to make you want to trade in your car for a moose and ride it to work. Section 8. From coast to coast, provincial leaders chime in. This trade war isn't just a federal issue in Canada. It's got provincial leaders all riled up too. From coast to coast, premiers are weighing in, each with their own take on the situation. Some, like the premiers of Ontario and Quebec, are feeling the heat directly. They're calling for federal help to protect their industries and workers. Others are using the opportunity to take shots at the federal government, blaming them for mishandling the situation. And then there are those who see this as a chance to push their own agendas. Like, hey, if we're going to be slapping tariffs on things, why not slap them on, insert pet peeve here. It's a whole political circus out there. Section 9, Summit Time, a glimmer of hope amidst the tension. Okay, so we've had the punches thrown, the economic predictions of doom, and the political grandstanding. But wait, is that a glimmer of hope on the horizon? there's talk of a new North American trade summit, a chance for Canada, the US and Mexico to sit down together and try to hash things out. Could this be the beginning of the end of the trade war? It's too early to say for sure, but hey, at least they're talking, right? And who knows, maybe with a little bit of diplomacy, a whole lot of compromise, and maybe some poutine to share, they can find a way to work things out. After all, neighbors should be there for each other, even when they're driving each other crazy. China is going through some really big changes. The number of people who can work is getting smaller, people's values are changing, and things are complicated with other countries. But at the same time, China's technology is booming. It's becoming a world leader in things like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and space exploration. These fast changes bring both problems and opportunities. It's important to understand these changes to know what's happening in China today. The Chinese government is making new rules to deal with these changes, boost the economy, and encourage new technologies. They want to keep things stable, make China competitive globally, and make sure China is important in the world. We'll look at the important things changing China, exploring all the details of this changing landscape. From the big cities to the quiet countryside, China is always evolving. How China deals with these changes will shape its future. China's population isn't growing as fast and its workers are getting older. This is a big problem. To help, the government is giving rewards to couples who have more children. These rewards include money, cheaper housing, and longer maternity leave. But it's hard to know if this will work because having kids is expensive, especially with the cost of living and education. At the same time, the government is stopping people from showing off their fancy things on social media. They want to discourage showing off wealth and make things fairer. Some influencers who showed off too much have had their accounts closed. This shows the government is worried about inequality and possible unrest. The government is also keeping an eye on people who live stream from the countryside. These online personalities show how simple and real rural life is, and lots of people in cities watch them. This shows that people miss traditional values and want a more relaxed life. The government is watching this closely because it can change how people think and what they want in life. China's internet situation is interesting. It has the most people online in the world and a huge tech industry. But there's a big difference between internet access in cities and the countryside. Things like internet speed and knowing how to use the internet are very different depending on where you live. This difference makes it harder for everyone to have the same chances and for society to be connected. The government is spending a lot of money to fix this. They're expanding internet access in rural areas, teaching people how to use the internet, and encouraging online stores to sell to people in the countryside. They want everyone to be part of the digital economy, giving more opportunities to businesses and people all over the country. But fixing this problem is about more than just internet access. It's also about making sure education, job training, and access to money are equal. The government is helping people start businesses in rural areas, teaching digital skills, and encouraging investment in the countryside. This is important so everyone can be part of China's digital transformation. Section 4. The appeal of country life. Recently, many young professionals from cities are moving to the countryside for a better life. This return to the countryside is happening because city housing is expensive, jobs are stressful, and people want to be closer to nature. It's also because rural live streamers make country life look appealing. They show how beautiful the countryside is, how fun farming can be, and how peaceful a slower life is. City people who are tired of city life like these videos, the government is watching this because it could help rural economies and make crowded cities less crowded. They are making it easier for people to start businesses in rural areas, improving infrastructure, and encouraging tourism. This move to the countryside shows that some Chinese people are changing their values. They want a more balanced life, focusing on happiness and connection, instead of just money and a big career. Section 5. Fighting for a better work-life balance. Working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week is called 996. It's been common in China's tech industry and other jobs for a long time. But now, especially young people are pushing back. The anti-996 movement wants a healthier work-life balance, fair pay, and respect for workers' rights. This movement is growing online, with workers sharing stories, protesting, and demanding better conditions. The government needs to fix this and make sure workers are treated fairly. The lying flat movement is another part of this change. Young people don't want to always be working and want a simpler life. They don't think always chasing money is important and are looking for other ways to be happy. This challenges the old idea that success means always working hard. These trends show that people are starting to realize that mental health, personal well-being, and a good work-life balance are important. They want fairer workplaces that care about employees' happiness as much as how much they work. A tale of two economies, growth amidst uncertainty. The U.S. economy presents a perplexing picture of resilience and fragility. Positive indicators, such as a low unemployment rate and steady consumer spending in some sectors, suggest an economy on solid ground. However, these positive signals are counterbalanced by persistent inflation, slowing job growth, and a decline in consumer confidence. This dichotomy makes it challenging to predict the future trajectory of the economy with certainty. The first quarter of 2025 saw GDP growth slow considerably, falling below 2%. This slowdown, coupled with mixed signals from other economic indicators, has ignited a debate among economists and policymakers. Is the U.S. economy heading for a soft landing, or are we on the brink of a recession? The answer to this question has profound implications for businesses, investors, and everyday Americans alike. The current economic landscape is shaped by a confluence of factors, both domestic and global. Domestically, the Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate hikes, aimed at taming inflation, have slowed down the housing market and made it more expensive for businesses to borrow money. Globally, the ongoing war in Ukraine, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical tensions continue to fuel uncertainty. Navigating this complex economic environment requires a nuanced understanding of the interplay between these various forces. In the following sections, we will delve deeper into the key economic indicators, analyze their implications for different sectors, and explore the potential scenarios that lie ahead for the U.S. economy. The U.S. labor market, a pillar of economic strength in recent years, is showing signs of softening. After months of robust job creation, the pace of hiring has slowed considerably in recent months. While the unemployment rate remains historically low, the slowdown in hiring, particularly in interest rate-sensitive sectors like technology and finance, raises concerns about the overall health of the labor market. In March 2025, the economy added 190,000 jobs, significantly lower than the average monthly job growth of over 400,000 seen in 2024. This slowdown in hiring is partly attributed to the Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate hikes, which have increased borrowing costs for businesses, leading some companies to scale back their hiring plans. Despite the slowdown in hiring, the demand for skilled workers remains high in certain sectors, such as healthcare and hospitality. These sectors, which faced acute labor shortages during the pandemic, continue to see strong demand for their services, leading to continued job growth. The slowdown in hiring, however, is putting downward pressure on wage growth. While wages continue to grow, the pace of growth has moderated in recent months. This moderation in wage growth, coupled with persistent inflation, is eroding the purchasing power of consumers, potentially impacting consumer spending in the coming months. Inflation, the economic bogeyman that reared its head in 2022, continues to cast a long shadow over the U.S. economy. While headline inflation has moderated from its peak in 2022, it remains stubbornly high, eroding consumer purchasing power and posing a significant challenge for policymakers. The Consumer Price Index, a key measure of inflation, rose by 0.4% in March 2025, pushing the annual inflation rate to 5%. While this represents a decline from the peak of 9.1% in June 2022, it is still significantly higher than the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Particularly concerning is the persistence of inflation in essential categories such as food, energy, and shelter. Food prices, for instance, have risen by over 8% in the past year, putting a strain on household budgets. The rising cost of essentials is forcing consumers to cut back on discretionary spending, potentially impacting economic growth. The Federal Reserve, tasked with maintaining price stability, has been aggressively raising interest rates in a bid to tame inflation. These rate hikes, however, come with their own set of risks, as they can slow down economic growth and potentially tip the economy into a recession. Section 4, Consumer Spending, a tale of two consumers. Consumer spending, which accounts for roughly 70% of U.S. economic activity, presents a mixed picture. While overall consumer spending remains relatively strong, a closer look reveals a tale of two consumers: those who are able to maintain their spending levels and those who are feeling the pinch of inflation and economic uncertainty. High-income consumers, who tend to have more savings and are less impacted by rising prices, continue to spend on discretionary items such as travel, dining out, and luxury goods. This segment of consumers has been a key driver of economic growth in recent months. Lower and middle-income consumers, however, are feeling the squeeze of inflation and are cutting back on discretionary spending. These consumers, who allocate a larger portion of their income towards essentials, are being forced to make difficult choices as the cost of food, energy, and housing continues to rise. The divergence in consumer spending patterns between high-income and lower-income households has significant implications for the economy. If lower and middle-income consumers continue to cut back on spending, it could lead to a slowdown in economic growth. Section 5 Housing Market cools down, high rates bite. The once booming U.S. housing market has cooled considerably in recent months, as the Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate hikes have pushed mortgage rates to their highest levels in over a decade. This sharp rise in mortgage rates has made it significantly more expensive for prospective homebuyers to purchase a home, leading to a decline in demand. The average 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rate currently stands at 6.5%, up from around 3% at the beginning of 2022. This dramatic increase in mortgage rates has added hundreds of dollars to the monthly mortgage payments for new home buyers, pricing many potential buyers out of the market. As a result of declining demand, home prices have begun to moderate in some parts of the country. However, the inventory of homes for sale remains low, providing some support for home prices. The combination of high mortgage rates and still elevated home prices has made housing affordability a major concern for many Americans. The slowdown in the housing market is having ripple effects throughout the economy. A decline in home sales impacts related industries such as construction, furniture, and mortgage lending. Furthermore, the decline in home values could erode homeowner equity, potentially impacting consumer spending. That's it for today, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more updates. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll catch you in the next video.